Welcome to part 3 of this 3-part series of making the Sub-Zero child sweater in size 8. In this part of the 3-part series, we will pick up stitches for the sleeves and knit our way down in rounds to the cuffs. The sleeves are shaped with a little bit of short row shaping, so we'll be going back and forth up here for the first inch or so before we join in rounds and work our way down to that cuff. Also in part 3, we'll be picking up stitches for the collar and working the collar. Next up, we'll be picking up stitches to make the sleeve of this kid-size sweater. I do happen to be using a small circumference circular needle. That's just a personal preference, and then as it moves down toward the second half of the sleeve, I will switch to the magic loop method. I'll show you how to do all that in this tutorial. But the sleeve is started by picking up stitches all the way around, and then for about the first inch along here, we're going to be working short rows back and forth. So not yet working in the round, but going back and forth, worked flat from the back to the front. Just doing some short row shaping until we get to in line with the body here, and then we will continue on with our sleeve decreases in the round to get down to the cuff. And the whole entire time we're just going to maintain the 4-row or round repeat that we've been doing the entire time for the body of this sweater. So it's the same pattern. And we just maintain it all the way down to the cuff, where we'll do a 1-by-1 rib. And make sure that when you're working the sleeve decreases, just make sure that you're keeping the pattern, where all the purl bumps are. Just make sure you're keeping those columns aligned so that the purl bumps appear in the same columns as you're working that pattern. The first thing we'll want to do is figure out where the middle of this armhole base is, and that's going to be this stitch right here. And we're going to pick up, so in total we're going to pick up 6 stitches along the armhole base, but since we're starting in the middle, we'll pick up 3 stitches along the base, 4 stitches up the diagonal edge from here to here. And then from along the straight edge to the top of the shoulder for this size of a sweater, we'll pick up about 20 stitches. It's okay if we're 1 or 2 stitches over. The main thing is that we want to pick up the same number of stitches along the front of the armhole and the same number of stitches along the back of the armhole. And we're also, since we're going to be working eventually in the round, we're going to want to make sure it is an even number of stitches. That way it'll support the 1-by-1 ribbing that we're going to do. So let's pick up 3 stitches along the base of this armhole. And then 4 stitches along the diagonal edge, so right to here. I'm just going to do my best to space out these picked up stitches. Okay, and then I'll transfer these to my circular needle and just get them out of the way. That'll make it also easier to count stitches all the way to the top of the armhole. There we go. And again, for this size sweater, we're going to be picking up 20 stitches from here till the top of the shoulder, and then 20 stitches down the back, 4 stitches along the diagonal, and finally 3 stitches along the armhole base. Now that we have our stitches picked up around the armhole, we're going to place a beginning of round marker. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that when I pick up stitches with a crochet hook, my stitches end up twisted on my needle. So I know that because of the way I pick up stitches with the crochet hook, my very first round of knitted stitches is going to be knit through the back loop. Again, that is just because of the way that I happen to pick up stitches with the crochet hook and then in transferring them to the needle. So the first thing I'm going to do is knit around to the last 7 stitches. The last 7 stitches will put me at the very first stitch of that diagonal edge that we talked about, where we were going to pick up 4 stitches along the diagonal edge of the armhole. So essentially what's going to happen is that each one of these stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, along the diagonal edge of each front and back of the sleeve of the armhole, is going to get wrapped in, as we're working short rows. So I'm going to knit around to the last 7 stitches, which is going to be the very first one. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to wrap the very first stitch on that diagonal edge. And then I'm going to turn the work and purl around to the last 7 stitches, again putting me at the first stitch along the diagonal edge of the armhole, and we're going to wrap that stitch and then turn back and keep knitting. And basically what we'll end up doing is wrapping each one of those diagonal each one of those 4 stitches on the diagonal edge. So for now, I'm just going to knit until the last 7 stitches. We're now at 7 stitches before the marker, and we want to wrap and turn this stitch right here. All that means is that we're going to move the yarn to the front, slip the next stitch. We're going to slip purlwise and wrap the working yarn around this stitch, and then move it back to the left hand needle. Okay. Then we're going to turn the work and start working purl rows. We've turned the work, and now we're going to just purl to the last 7 stitches before the marker. And what that will do is put us at the very first stitch on that diagonal edge of the armhole where we had picked up, if you remember, we picked up 4 stitches, and we're going to wrap each one of those 4 stitches. So right now I'm just going to purl my way back to the last 7 stitches before the marker. We are now 7 stitches before the marker, and we're going to wrap this stitch just like we did on the last on the last one that we did, except the yarn's already in front, so we're just going to slip that stitch, wrap the yarn, and slip that stitch back onto the left hand needle. We're going to turn the work, and now we're going to knit our way back to where we see where we wrapped the stitch right here, the first turning round that we had. We're going to pick up this wrap to hide it, and then wrap the next stitch. That next stitch is the second stitch of the four stitches that we picked up on that diagonal edge. Okay, and don't forget that since this is the let me see here, the third row in that 4-row pattern we've been working, we want to make sure we do a knit one, purl one on this row. So we'll do, we'll just start with a knit one, purl one. And make our way to that stitch that we wrapped in the previous row. Now we're at that wrapped stitch, the very first one we did. I want to pick up this wrap. So to do that, I'm not going to knit that stitch that we wrapped. I'm going to slip it onto the right hand needle. I'm going to pick up that wrap and just slide that onto the needle as well. And we'll slide both of those back to the left hand needle and knit them together. And the next stitch we need to wrap. So we're going to, just like we did the very first time with the first stitch, we're going to put the yarn in the front. And remember, I am going to be untwisting my stitch, so you'll see me reorient it. And again, that's just because of the way I pick up stitches on a crochet hook. So I've brought the yarn in front. I am going to slip that stitch to the right hand needle and wrap it, and then slip that stitch back to the left hand needle and turn the work. And now we're just going to continue our way back by purling to the stitch that is wrapped on this side. That very first stitch on the diagonal, we're going to find it, pick up the wrap and hide it just like we did just a moment ago, and we will wrap the next stitch. And when all 4 stitches on each diagonal edge have been wrapped, then we're going to join and work in rounds down to the cuff. We've now made our way by purling back to the stitch that we wrapped. So we want to pick up that wrap and hide it, very similarly to how we did in the previous row, except we're going to do, instead of knitting those two together, since the last time we did it we were on a right side row, this time we're on the wrong side row. I'm going to pick up that wrap and put it onto the right hand needle and slip the 2 stitches back to the left hand needle, but this time I'm going to purl these 2 together through the back loop, and that'll really hide it from the right side row. So I'm going to purl those 2 together through the back loop and then slip the very next stitch, wrap the yarn, slip it back, and turn the work. And we're just going to continue doing that back and forth, wrapping and turning back and forth until we have wrapped all 4 stitches on each, the front of the sweater and the back of the sweater. So we want to wrap all 4 stitches, and on this side we've just wrapped the second stitch of the 4 stitches on the diagonal edge. So now we're going to knit our way to the other side, find that stitch that we wrapped. This one actually, we're going to knit all the way back here. We're going to pick up the stitch, pick up the wrap and hide it, and wrap the next stitch and make our way back, purling back. Okay, so just do that back and forth until all the stitches on that diagonal edge have been wrapped. The fourth stitch on that diagonal edge has now been wrapped, and we've turned the work, and we're going to make our way back around. We're going to knit. I just did a knit one, purl one on the right side row of this short row, and then purled all the way back, wrapped that last stitch on the diagonal edge, and now I've turned the work. I'm going to knit around. Basically we're going to knit in rounds from here, so we're going to make it all the way back and just knit in the round as we would normally. And we're going to knit actually the first 3 rounds of this sleeve. We're just going to knit the first round, and then I believe the second round. The third round is going to be a knit one, purl one, just like we've been doing, knit one, purl one. That'll be the third round of the sleeve rounds that we're working right now. So when we've gotten through that, we'll come back and I'll explain the sleeve decreases that we'll be doing. Now that we've worked 3 rounds, we will begin the sleeve decreases. The sleeve decreases I'll show you in the next round is the decrease round, and we're going to repeat that every 6 rounds 8 more times. After we do the first one, it'll be done 8 more times every 6 rounds. So I just want to show you a little tip here. When I do sleeve decreases or anything that has multiple things going on at the same time, I usually make a little, I don't know, table, and I just mark off the row or round that I'm on and what needs to happen in that round. So for example, I've got a decrease round coming up, and then I'll also mark here, like over here, I've got some dots to show me that would be, for example, a knit one, purl one round. So again, just it's a little helpful tool that when there's multiple things going on in multiple rounds, it just helps me to visually see what I'm working on. So this is a sleeve decrease round. And the first thing we're going to do for the decreases that are going to happen on the left side of this marker, we're going to knit 2 together. I'm going to knit my way around, and when I get to the decrease that needs to happen on the right side of this marker, I'll come back and show you that. It will just be an SSK. And when we get to the last 2 stitches, we're going to do an SSK. So slip, slip, knit those 2 together. And we've now decreased 2 stitches in this sleeve round. And we'll just continue working our way around and doing those decreases every 6 rounds, 8 more times. I've been knitting the sleeve of this sweater in the round on these short circumference circular needles, but now I'm at a point where the number of stitches and the size of the sleeve is a little bit too small to continue doing this comfortably. So I'm going to switch to the magic loop method, and to do that I'm going to need a much longer cable needle, and I'm going to transfer half of these stitches to one side of this cable needle and the other half of the stitches to the other side of the cable needle, and then I'll show you how to do the magic loop method. We've just finished knitting across the first half of those sleeve stitches. I'm going to turn this work, and now that we need to come around and work these stitches, we're going to shove the cable through here so that we can bring the needle tip into the work, and we're going to pull out the needle that was in the back, and just pull it out, not all the way, because we want to make sure there's enough cable that's over here that allows the cable, the stitches to remain in this round formation. So we've pulled out enough of the needle so that we can work with it, and we just continue working in the round. Now that we've decreased for the sleeves, we did it every 6 rounds, 8 more times after I showed you the initial decrease round. Once you finish that, we're going to decrease every 8 rounds 2 times, okay? Once we get to the cuff, we're going to switch to the smaller size needles, which I've already done, and we'll start working a 1 by 1 rib around, which is just a knit 1, purl 1, and we're going to do that for 10 rounds. And then we'll bind off with the simple sewn bind off. You can use any bind off you like. I like using the simple sewn bind off because it's pretty stretchy, and on a cuff you really do want to make sure your bind off is a stretchy one. We've knit 2 inches of ribbing for the cuff, and on the very last round I've just knit all stitches. Instead of doing ribbing, I've knit all stitches in the last round, and that's just to set up for my bind off. If you're going to use a different bind off, then you don't have to knit all the stitches of the last round. I just find that I like the way it looks when I knit all the stitches of the last round when I'm using this sewn bind off. To do this bind off, we'll just thread a yarn needle, and it's really easy. You insert the yarn needle through the first 2 stitches purlwise and pull the yarn through. I've got to make sure I'm not around this needle right here. And then insert the yarn needle knitwise through the first stitch and drop it off the needle. Pull the yarn through. And that's it. We repeat those 2 steps all the way around. Insert purlwise through 2 stitches, insert knitwise through the first stitch, drop it off the needle. And we'll do that all the way around. The last thing we need to do is do the collar for this sweater. I'm just going to go around the neck and pick up stitches. I'm going to pick up an even number of stitches and then do a 1 by 1 rib for about 1 inch. And then I'm going to bind off and put this on a blocking board, and that'll be it. And we are done with this sweater. We worked from the bottom of it in rounds up to the armholes. We did some armhole shaping, and then on up to the neck where we have a nice little detail here, and short row shoulders, which we joined to the back with 3 needle bind off. And then we worked down in rounds from picking up stitches from the body to make the sleeves, and then working down in rounds to the cuffs. and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching.